Biography of Edgar Allan Poe. Edgar Allan Poe, born in January 19 of the year 1809 in Boston, Massachusetts, United States, died in October 7 in the year of 1849, Baltimore, Maryland, was an American short story writer, poet, critic, and editor who is famous for his cultivation of mystery and the macabre. Poe was the son of the English-born actress Elizabeth Arnold Poe and David Poe Jr., an actor from Baltimore. After his mother died in Richmond, Virginia, in 1811, he was taken into the home of John Allan, a Richmond merchant, and of his childless wife. He was later taken to Scotland and England, where he was given a classical education that was continued in Richmond. For 11 months in 1826, he attended to the University of Virginia, but his gambling losses at the university so incensed his guardian that he refused to let him continue, and Poe returned to Richmond to find his sweetheart, Sarah Elmira Royster, engaged. He went to Boston, where in 1827 he published a pamphlet of youthful Byronic poems, Tamerlane, and other poems. Poverty forced him to join the army under the name of Edgar A. Perry, but on the death of Poe's foster mother, John Allan purchased his release from the army and helped him get an appointment to the USA Military Academy at West Point. Before going, Poe published a new volume of Baltimore Al-Araf, Tamerlane, and minor poems in 1829. He successfully sought expulsion from the academy, where he was absent from all drills and classes for a week. He proceeded to New York City and brought out a volume of poems containing several masterpieces, some showing the influence of John Keats, Percy Bysshe Shelley, and Samuel Taylor Coleridge. Poe then returned to Baltimore, where he began to write stories. In 1833, his Mistress Found in a Bottle won $50 from a Baltimore weekly, and by the year of 1835 he was in Richmond as editor of the Southern Literary Messenger. He made he made a name as a critical reviewer and married his young cousin Virginia Clem, who was only 13. Poe seems to have been an affectionate husband and son-in-law. Poe's wife, Virginia, died in January 1847. The following year he went to Providence, Rhode Island, to woo Sarah Helen Whitman, a poet. There was a brief engagement. Poe had close but platonic entanglements with Annie Richmond and with Sarah Anna Lewis, who helped him financially. He composed poetic tributes to all of them. In the year of 1848, he also published the lecture Eureka, a transcendental explanation of the universe, which has been hailed as a masterpiece by some critics and as a nonsense by others. In the year of 1849, he went to South, had a wild spree in Philadelphia, but got safely to Richmond, where he finally became engaged by Elmira Royster. By then, he widowed Mr. Shelton and spent a happy summer with only one or two relapses. He enjoyed the companionship of childhood friends and an unromantic friendship with a young poet, Susan Archer Talley. Poe had some forebodings of death when he left Richmond for Baltimore late in September. There he died. Although whether from drinking, hair failure, or other causes was still uncertain in the 21st century, he was buried in Westminster Presbyterian churchyard in Baltimore. In his most relevant works, we have among his most notable works are poems such as The Raven and Annabel Lee, as well as horror stories, like the famous The Fall of the House of Usher, The Telltale Heart, and The Black Cat. And let's not forget that he is also known as the father of the avant-garde detective novel for his renowned short story, The Murders in the Rue Morgue. In his literary currents to which he belonged, among the literary movements to which he belonged were the Gothic movement, the dark romanticism that characterizes him so much. We can also find that he was part of this who followed symbolism and, of course, the detective story. Most used literary genres. Among his most frequently used literary genres, science fiction stands out, of which he was a pioneer. His main contributions have been the fantasy short story and the detective novel. Literary period where it is located. Edgar Allan Poe is primarily situated within 19th century American Romanticism, especially its darker, more cynical form. His work is characterized by themes of death, despair, and the macabre. He is heavily influenced by Gothic literature and is considered a precursor to detective fiction, science fiction, and the avant-garde short story. Then we have an analysis of the poem The Raven. The main theme here is the central poem is unresolved loss and the grief that leads to madness. The narrator is consumed by the pain of his beloved Leonore's death and the impossibility of ever seeing her again. Despair and melancholy are the driving forces behind the psychological conflict of the work. Protagonist. The Raven and the narrator are the two main characters here. The narrator, a student tormented by the death of his beloved Eleanor. His conflict is strictly internal, as he experiences the duality of wanting to alleviate his pain while simultaneously clinging to the memories of his lost love. The Raven, a symbolic bird that perches on a bust of Pallas Athena and enters the narrator's room. The raven is what triggers the narrator's madness, because its only response, nevermore, intensifies the torment and erases any possibility of solace. Conflicts. The conflict is mostly psychological and internal. The story is told from the narrator's point of view as the battles of his own suffering, his fear of dying, and his obsession with Eleanor. The raven, rather than being a physical enemy, stands in for the narrator's despair and forces him to confront the reason behind his loss. Poetic structure. The poem consists of 18 stanzas, each with 6 lines. It employs a somber tone and a musical rhythm, using a troic ottava rima that produces a repetitive and fluid cadence, similar to that of a lullaby, but with an ominous effect. Furthermore, it includes literary devices such as internal rhyme and alliteration, thus generating a sad and gloomy atmosphere. And finally, we have composition. In his essay, The Philosophy of Composition, Edgar Allan Poe described the poem's creative process. He explains in this text that he deliberately and methodically intended for Raven to evoke a sense of melancholy and sadness in the reader. Since the author planned every aspect of the poem, from the theme to the structure, to achieve maximum emotional impact, he disproves the notion that it was written on the spur of the moment.